I'm here to say from rivals to collaborators, and now to what I would say is quite a harmonious
coexisting partnership, I'd say. Like the space race, like who could be better, who could get there first. I think that's what they were really focused on back then, and now it's definitely coexisting with each other. They both have their strengths. You know, a lot of us 10 years ago probably didn't see this coming. All right, so we're back. Today we are going to be talking about Apple versus Microsoft, how they've redefined how businesses use technology and how they've gone from rivals to now collaborators. So
what's your guys' earliest memory of Microsoft software on a Mac?
Oh, if I were to go first, I would say Entourage.
Oh, I don't even know what that is.
Will, okay. You're showing your age and I'm showing mine. So Entourage was the name of the app that is now called Outlook on a Mac.
Oh, no, wait. No, I think I do maybe briefly remember it.
I was full hardcore into the Mac Mail app and I would use that religiously.
That's a sentence I've never heard before.
Yeah, it's true. It was pretty much Microsoft's key mail app.
Yeah, okay.
And it came with the box. So, fun fact, you used to have to buy.
Yeah, I know this. I'm old enough for that.
To know? Okay, yeah.
Because on the Genius Bar, if you ever wipe someone's computer, they're like, what about my license? Yeah. I haven't got my key anymore. I'm like, oh, well.
And inside the box had CDs. Do you know what a CD is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Shit.
And it had like a product key.
Yeah.
Yeah, that type of stuff.
Out of a lot of people my age, I guess I was one of the earlier adopters of Mac and Apple. My dad worked in printing, so they only used Macs back then. So we had a Mac at home. We had the G3. And before that, we had the previous version as well. I can't even remember.
Beige.
The really boxy beige one. Can't remember. Happy, sad face, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was one of the only kids at school that would, write up a text edit, bring it to school, couldn't plug it into the PCs and actually get it to convert because it was all on AppleWorks back then. So before Pages even existed. So
I feel like that's a bit of a flex nowadays.
I think that's like I don't really have a lot of experience with maybe getting Word too early on because I think it was ingrained into me that you just kind of used what it came with.
Yeah.
And because it would work and it'd be great. It did. It was amazing, but not for when you were then, going to school and trying to open up your document and it would all just be gibberish and not great.
My first experience was probably a little bit later on. Yeah, my sister got a MacBook computer and it was one of the first generations of MacBook Pro,
like
right?
the coloured one.
First kind of came out. Yeah, and it had like a black or white clamshell. They got Microsoft Office installed on it for her. And so I remember playing around on it. And I just remember how pixelated and slow it was.
Yeah.
And like everything was grainy. You like look at the cursor when it wasn't on Microsoft and it was like pixel perfect. And then when you moved it onto Microsoft, it was like all grainy and horrible and like ugly looking. And so I just remember thinking like, I never want to use Microsoft products. And then I think that's probably led me to where I am now.
And I think those assumptions carry over. I get that sentiment, especially when I talk to clients, have this memory of interacting with you early and going, oh, nah, Microsoft plus Apple, no.
Niko, I'll throw it over to you for a little bit of history and sort of how we've got to this stage today.
I think anyone who's kind of been following tech in the past couple decades would remember a world very heavily dominated by PCs. If we go as far back as the 80s, especially when it comes to the Mac's first release, fun fact for those either Gen Z, born after the 90s, Windows was never a popular option for a GUI-based computer, graphical user interface, click, mouse, drag, drop. But they actually got that idea from Xerox. So Xerox came up with the GUI first. Apple saw the potential of that and embedded into the Macintosh project. So in 1984, they released the Macintosh and it was the first popularized GUI-based computer that was made for the everyday person. And that just spawned, the way forward for what computers might look like for a home, but also for the workplace. And that's when Microsoft decided to, improve their version of a GUI, which is now known as Windows, by far the most popular operating system. Mind you, that has shifted because of the popularity of smartphone operating systems. But back in those days, it was very much a race to who would dominate being able to use a graphical user interface, a GUI, for sort of everyday use. And then come to the mid-90s around when Windows 95 came out. It was an interesting time where technology finally became affordable enough for everyday people to be able to invest into a computer.
Yep.
And Windows was easily the most popular solution. Key to its success was you could install Windows on any PC. And there were so many brands that were coming to the party. HP, Dell, Gateway. Do you remember? I'm probably showing my age here. And you can even go down the route that I did, and that was like you could build a PC. You could like buy the board and the memory and this and that, and just load Windows on it. You couldn't do that on a Mac. I think Apple always had the philosophy that if you were serious about software, you would do hardware as well. I think fast forwarding the story, Apple saw them taking the GUI. If you look at the way Windows was made, you could tell it was very influenced by how the Macintosh did things. Windows would be layered on top of each other. You would use a mouse to be able to navigate through files. And Apple was like, well, this looks very familiar. Didn't you just copy us? So they took him to court. The ruling became, well, Apple borrowed the idea from Xerox. So who's really owning what?
Isn't the ultimate phrase, imitation is the best form of flattery?
Yeah, exactly. Microsoft ultimately won that lawsuit, and they went on to become the dominant force in sort of the computing space. Now we come to 1997. Apple's not in a good way. Steve Jobs had left. He started a company called Next, started to uncover the power of a Unix-based system. Oh, geez, this is getting real deep. He's working at Next. He starts Pixar. Apple's not in a good way. They're like pretty much months from bankruptcy. He comes back as interim CEO and has a plan to streamline, simplify the business, bringing it back to its core values, stripping down the amount of products that they sell, really kind of like hone in on what's important about Apple, which is, I think, their branding. One of the things that he did that was quite unpopular, tapped into their key vendors. Enter Microsoft. The sentiment at that time was very much Windows stole our GUI. So anything to do with them is like they're the enemy type thing, right?
It's like the enemies to lovers story.
Yeah. So the fact that he brought in Bill Gates in a keynote to their investors and to
wild.
It was wild to bring him in to address the Mac followers, the fanboys. Yeah. Bill came with the goods. He invested $150 million to keep the company afloat. Now, these were bought in the form of stocks, non-voting stocks. So Microsoft didn't have any influence in how those funds were used, but effectively saved the company. Using that, Steve and his team was able to turn things around. He soon announced the iMac, and then eventually got into the music business via the iPod. And then things just turned around 180 from that point. Imagine going from 1984, the Mac was announced. Microsoft created very early versions of word processing, and then having the rivalry with the computer operating systems, then saving the company in 97. There's a history there, right?
For people who don't know the history, do you know why Microsoft invested that money into Apple? You know, if they are enemies?
I recently watched that keynote, and one of the things that Bill Gates said, Apple has been an important partner to Microsoft. A lot of people were using the Macs to run the Office suite. So they saw Apple as a key partner to sell what they sell, which is effectively software. If we move to the 2000s, Apple went from selling the iMac to creating the iPod and then eventually making the iPhone. And that's when, things really started to shift. That was when the market cap shifted from, Microsoft being at the top to Apple. Yeah. Imagine from like the 2010s onwards, how did things shift? Well, Microsoft, as I mentioned earlier, moved from just selling pure software. And as the internet became faster, the rollout of the NBN, things moving from on-prem to cloud-based, and for cloud-based services to become more affordable, Microsoft was able to enter the game when it comes to a cloud service via licensing. That's the context.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's important is like, where are we at today? As a true Apple fanboy, I think the attitude is like, if I'm Mac or if I'm Apple, then I don't really want to do anything with Windows or Microsoft. But I'm here to say confidently that, from rivals to collaborators, and now to what I would say is quite a harmonious
coexisting partnership, I'd say.
Yeah.
Like the space race, like who could be better, who could get there first. I think that's what they were really focused on back then, and now it's definitely coexisting with each other. They both have their strengths.
Using these solutions, Apple for the end users, for their legendary consumer ease of use, to integrating that with like an enterprise grade tool like Microsoft, the suite of services that they provide, there is a synergy there.
They can exist with each other and actually work quite seamlessly. And I think a lot of people are probably just stuck in the past with the way it used to work, for sure.
Kind of like toot our own horn at Mac Center. I feel like that's what we've been doing. When it comes to using the Mac, you could use either.
Definitely. And I mean, they both have their place, for sure.
Let's deep even further into that, right? If you're not going to use Microsoft, you would use Google Workspace. Personally, do you have a preference?
Personally, I do use Gmail and a few other Google alternatives. It really comes down to personal preference and also size of your business. Price obviously comes into it as well.
Yep.
Licensing options, they've all changed now to subscription-based fees. It's all pretty much on par there. Microsoft has a lot more advanced features that can be built upon, especially if you're a growing business quite rapidly. But also at the same time, you can't rule out Google Workspace too. It may just not have the advances that 365 have, but they're pretty close nowadays. There is also just the ease of use. A lot of people are used to Gmail and a lot of other features that Google give you, as well as just being used to the browser experience, which is what they really hone on in. Microsoft really focuses on the local apps themselves. They really sort of push that. They do give you the options, obviously, of going just web-based if you want to. That is probably the license that we see people steer away from, because most people are used to having the local apps on their computers. 5 years ago, when you used to have to buy the CD and pop it in and put your license in.
Most people's relationship with Microsoft is the local apps. Yeah. When you introduce someone to Google Workspace, the natural experience is all in the browser.
Exactly.
Right? Kudos to Microsoft, because they've elevated that experience, expanding their offering from just the apps themselves to a cloud service.
Yeah.
A small business could use almost like a turnkey solution. You pay for a certain license. The cloud services that you need, whether it be mail, files, collaboration tools. You also get security features if set up correctly. Come and talk to Will or me about that. If you, shameless plug.
They've added that missing key of like collaboration, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe Google's on the back end, the backside of this, because they're sort of missing the local apps, but they do have the collaboration side of it. I think Microsoft has probably just got the edge because they work quite hard with trying to make it so seamless, because they know this is a market that they need to keep growing. Google's not far behind. I will say Microsoft maybe makes it a little bit easier for us to troubleshoot some things. It gives us a little bit more leeway into what we can look for. And whereas Google, it's more invasive with trying to troubleshoot, just because there's probably not as many options. But in saying that, that's just if things aren't syncing correctly and stuff like that, which can happen with anything.
To throw a controversial opinion in there, Google Workspace is probably better for small businesses to set up.
Yes.
Whereas
exactly.
Microsoft
If you don't
is
have
really
your own,
good.
you don't have your own IT team or someone who are actually going to take care of your IT needs, definitely Google Workspace would be the one that you would go to, because it's much more user-friendly and you can maintain it a lot easier. Whereas 365, you need someone who knows their stuff to get that set up, to keep it running.
Better set up for growth. I find that the ones that are sort of growing in user number partner with key clients who they collaborate with. We find that when it comes to compatibility and
it all comes back to
intercompany
to Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly.
You see a lot of Google clients still actually using Microsoft to collaborate as well. So they may be paying another license on top of that to actually get access to certain features to make sure everything's running smoothly. So you don't think about all these things necessarily at the time of signing up and actually getting it all started. To move completely from one to the other isn't always, the easiest thing to do, but it does happen.
We do it a lot.
Yeah.
I would say. Sometimes the drive to move from one to the other is price.
Yep.
Sometimes it's compliance. Sometimes, a person of influence will come from another company.
And I mean, it's not a hard thing to do. Now it's a lot more seamless and we can get it done pretty easily, but it's a bit of a process. It's one thing to use one platform and then to switch and change to another one. It can be a little bit challenging for just the users themselves, especially if they're not used to one or the other.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are the things to weigh up. And we see quite a fair mix at Mac Center, I think.
Yeah.
Probably surprising how many Google Workspace clients we probably do have. Just from my own personal opinion.
Now, we've talked about Microsoft products on Apple devices, but we haven't talked about how you manage Apple products with Microsoft. So like Intune is what I'm alluding to here, right? Businesses face this as an industry problem and solution at the same time. You want to manage all of your devices in the same space. That's kind of what Intune offers. But there's some really bad limitations actually that Intune had previously. And one of those is like an infrastructure. It was like reporting into the device every 8 hours. It's like not immediate enough. It kind of feels like 8 hours is a very long time to not talk to a device, especially when companies like Jamf Pro or Kanji or even our Rhubarb connect in every 15 minutes. But there's also been a shift in recent months where Microsoft have been working really closely with Apple to kind of close the gap on what Microsoft's Intune can offer in terms of device management for Apple devices. So that's both iOS and macOS. And now they still don't offer anything for Watch, TV, anything for Vision Pro. Microsoft have already released their Microsoft apps for Apple Vision Pro. So it would make sense that they'll look at deploying it through Intune as well. Kind of like going back to what you were saying earlier, Niko, about them kind of being symbiotic. That's the word. They're coexisting, right? And they're kind of leveraging off of each other's support.
We came from rivals and only being very selective about the bits and pieces that they do interact with. And now we're talking about a license that gives a business access to not just the apps, but cloud services, security, all with the Mac in mind. Apple users are no longer a second-class citizen in the mix. I think it's just getting the word out that that's how it is today. Our clients are experiencing the full benefits of that and not having to look elsewhere in terms of licensing or extra cost to be able to get those benefits. It's all happening under the this one umbrella.
They're creating sort of this big empire that they're not missing anything.
It's not as restrictive is probably the word you're looking for. It's not as restrictive. You can enroll a Mac in what is and has been known as just a Microsoft environment. This opens up the door for Apple devices in every business. And there's no longer that stigma that you can't have it operate because you'd need another MDM solution and another security solution and another person to manage that. You can just do it all in the same place.
I think to round it off as well, it's probably a good thing to mention that we are using Microsoft here at Mac Center.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got Loop right in front of me. We communicate on Teams.
Teams in front of me.
So it's not just a preferred option. It's the one that we use internally. And so as the new features release, we test them internally. We experience it ourselves. So for predictions for the future, Will, what's on the horizon? What do you think could improve upon this
existing relationship that Apple and Microsoft have?
Yeah.
Well, it's a great question because you're already kind of at a point where they're working together to achieve productivity and devices in the hands of users to allow them to grow a business. But what's kind of around the corner? We've seen Apple Intelligence come out and it's got its integration with ChatGPT. But I'd love to be able to see how that could end up working for businesses. Maybe you can integrate your Mac's AI functionality directly to a Copilot and secure the data even further for a business and still provide the productivity gains. So that could be really interesting. I've worked in businesses that have Slack, right? And I love Slack. Bit of a nerd when it comes to using Slack. Teams is kind of falling short in a few areas, and I think they've got a long product roadmap ahead of them. You can get lost very easily. There's so many channels, there's so many teams, there's so many interactions that you have, and they all kind of get merged together. And so I think there's a user experience thing there that they need to overcome. And then Apple Vision Pro is going to be a huge market. So how do users in businesses that currently have Microsoft 365 and tenancy, how do they start using Apple Vision Pro in a productive sense? Does the experience need to be looked after and curated a little bit further? You know, a lot of the apps that are in Apple Vision Pro right now are just these 2D panes, iPhone equivalent of the app. You want to play with things in 3 dimensions and in the space that you're in, right? So how do you kind of incorporate the shared experience of Apple Vision Pro as well? So how do you have like multiple users wearing them and interact on the same project? There's some cool stuff that could happen there. That's kind of like how I see them developing together. Ultimately, we want to see more businesses develop with Apple products. An employee choice program is something that's been coined. If you walked into a business and they said, would you like a Windows PC or a Mac? I know a lot of people would probably pick a Mac, but they're not getting that choice. Businesses aren't opening up that door. That's kind of why we exist as a company, right? It's actually to try and help create that experience and break down those barriers that businesses have built up over time, just thinking that Microsoft and Apple don't work together.
I think gone are the days that we're seeing the hardware race against them. I'm a PC and I'm a Mac ads. I think those days are well past us now.
Yeah.
Interesting to see, where they've come from and where they are today. You know, a lot of us 10 years ago probably didn't see this coming.
I mean, they're so well integrated now.
One can't almost exist without the other. Maybe it will end up like that as well.
Yeah.
Especially in a business sense.
Especially with what needs to be done in this day and age when it comes to compliance, when it comes to security. They're definitely cloud-based, definitely tick those boxes. Half the trouble is trying to choose which horses to ride. You know, you can be confident that if you choose Apple and if you choose Microsoft, they're going to continue to evolve together and improve together. So it just gives that confidence to the decision maker, whether it be the business owner or the guys responsible for the technology. So that wraps up our Apple and Microsoft
collaboration
segment.
It was the AppleSoft segment.
AppleSoft. Okay.
It feels like they could merge. Who knows?
Yeah. Maybe that's, who knows?
Yeah.
Imagine that. Maybe that should have been in our predictions.
We'll see. If you'd like to know more about Apple and Microsoft and how, if you're interested in these solutions or if you have them in place and you just want to see them optimized.
If you want more out of it, how you can get your money's worth.
Exactly. Hit us up. We can certainly help or give you advice. But until then, we'll catch you guys in the next one.